Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you might be around the world, and thank you for joining us. Definitely want to welcome everyone to the last Catalyzing Conversation of 2024 Catalyzing the Future events. I have the great privilege today of being with Alan Camus, who I would love to join us, if you will, into the room, and we're going to have a number of guests that are going to be sharing some perspectives with us. Before I hand it off to Aaron, I just want to, Alan, and let him take it away. I just want to emphasize a few things. This has been quite the journey for 2020, definitively triggered by the human crisis. And we've gone from leading through the crisis to transcending and catalyzing the future. 4 themes that have guided us. And I want to share those and then kind of let Alan move forward with the great conversation that's forthcoming. We've really emphasized very openly to survive and thrive as a global community all around. We need to be tech enabled, and technology has been an enabler, and it can be a disabler for us as well if we abuse it. Additionally, business focused, as businesses can really help shape a greater, better society. And that's been another pillar. The third one is human powered. Extremely key to emphasize that it's not human centric, it's human powered, because humans are essentially the force behind everything. And that comes off through all the humanity and the conversations that have unfolded and will continue to unfold. And then lastly, society embracing. And I know Alan well enough to know that he definitely brings a unique perspective, and he's got a great panel that he'll be moderating. So Alan, with already saying too much, welcome, my good friend.
Thank you, Si. Good morning. So agreed. This is, I think, going to be a great panel this morning. At least it's this morning on the east coast of the United States. Could be another time where you're joining us from. And what I thought would be a really interesting and special way to close the year was to have a slightly different type of panel. And so where in the various catalyzing conversations that have happened throughout the year, there's been a number of industry experts and people who bring a wealth of experience and knowledge on a range of topics, accomplished authors and consultants and lecturers and et cetera. And all very valid and important perspectives of what's going on in the world and the way we are going to move forward. What I thought would be interesting is to take kind of what I call the practitioner's perspective. And we put a panel together of people who work inside companies, all leaders and kind of corporate leaders and experienced executives in their own right, who can share with us what's been going on in their business and their industry and how they see their businesses shaping and the people around them and their own industries. And so why don't we bring them in and introduce them, and we'll have a chance to hear what they have to say. So good morning, good evening, all. Thank you for joining. And so to get started, why don't we take just a couple minutes? We can go around the room and let everyone take a couple minutes to introduce themselves. And I think to those people listening live right now or the recording, you will quickly start to get a sense of why we have these people with us today as they introduce themselves and you hear a little bit about their background. So with that, we'll start with you, Araceli.
I knew you were going to go to me first. Good morning, good evening, afternoon, everyone. I am Araceli Avionn. I am a senior leader in the air travel industry logistics. I have been doing that logistics for the past 10 years. That's what I obtained my bachelor's degree in. This is what I enjoy to do. So anything that embodies getting a person, place, or thing from point A to point B is something that excites me, something that I would like to speak towards today, specifically air travel. I look forward to our conversation.
So we can go alphabetically. That's how I kind of frame my questions if you want. And so CD, you want to jump to you next then?
Absolutely. Good morning, good evening, wherever you are joining from. I am CD. I go by my initials. I'm joining from India. I work in the healthcare industry in product development. I currently work in a healthcare IT company. I'm very involved and engaged in the overall product development ecosystem, the high-tech area, and kind of interested in what goes on, what makes things work, what makes people tick in this domain. And, it has been very intriguing how things have progressed in the pandemic phase, and what have we learned, what will we take to the future. So very interested to be here. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you. Kineta, you're up, if you'd like.
Hello, I'm Kineta Lewis-Harrison. I am a funeral service expert. I assist those who are in the death care industry, managing a premier location in Houston, Texas. And I am here to share a positive outlook on what we have experienced in 2020 and what we see in the year to come from the death care industry.
Hi, good day. I am Ann Lichon. My company is Combined Computer Resources. We are a consulting services company. We've been in business now 28 years, which is a long time. I'm totally dating myself. But I think that what I do best is I'm a matchmaker in finding people and positions and making that work. And I'm very interested in talking today about, about where the consulting industry is going and recruiting practices and how people are going to respond with the work from home.
Okay, so before I get into my leadoff questions, and I just organized my questions again alphabetically, so not that I'd be picking on Araceli and start first, but that's the beauty of an A. I grew up with an A name, so I was either always first or last in everything I did growing up. So what I find interesting about you folks, I think this is going to come out in the conversation, is you all do very different things, but every one of you do something that is very tightly coupled to relationships and interactions and people. If people didn't interact and commerce wasn't really connected and fluid, we wouldn't necessarily need efficient logistics, right? People just be doing their own thing on their own. And if we didn't have globalization the way we do, and the need to work across, following the sun or whatever term you want to use, I would never know CD or anything of that sort, or the people work globally. I think the world, and when we think about the death care industry, is something that probably most people didn't think about if they didn't have to more than a year ago. And today it's something that far more people are thinking about and thinking about in a greater context. It's now conversation that's much more alive or related in corporate America and companies and workforces than it ever was before. And then there's the whole issue of recruiting, right? Talent and the importance of talent. So to me, there's this interesting thread that weaves through all of you. And I think we're going to hear more of that through our conversation. So to start with you, Araceli, and we'll kind of start, I'll throw a question out, something I'm a little curious about, which is, in your area of specialty in airline, travel, logistics, the related food and beverage, et cetera, there's been a significant shift over the last year in business travel and how that's impacted the airline industry. And what I'm curious about is we hear a whole lot today about different programs around cleanliness and seating on planes and more innovation and digitization around check-in process and all these different things. In fact, even today in logistics, over the last 2 weeks, there seems to have been a whole new resetting of expectations of overall parcel delivery and what does today even mean anymore? So dramatic shifts in all these things. And what I'm curious about is, how much do you think we are actually seeing a change in behavior, or are these just business realities, economic realities, staffing realities that are all going to change or go away as soon as they can? So it's not really a change in behavior; it's a change in reality. Or in fact, do you think we're going to see a change in behavior?
So I think it's going to be a change in reality. I don't think that we go backwards and go back to the way we were previously. I say that because this is the new expectation of how we're going to live, and maybe we didn't think about these items before. So, for example, we'll start off with, you said, the food and beverage within the airline industry. And it's all driven by the pandemic. So previously, if you're on the plane and let's say you're in business class or something of that nature, and someone is coming by and they're pouring you wine, you may not have thought anything negative, or you may not have thought, okay, someone may be breathing on this wine as they are pouring it. Now with the pandemic, you're going to think twice before, that comfort level came back to having someone pour wine, even though the CDC and everyone says it's not transmittable through food and things of that nature. It was more so a person standing over you is what you really had the fear of. So can we go back to a place where you're being served food and served wine? Absolutely. But I think that's going to be driven by personal comfort level and what you feel comfortable with. It's kind of like how the industry at the beginning, the real selling point to make everyone feel comfortable was that we weren't filling the middle seat. No airlines were filling the middle seat. So that in theory, you're not next to someone. However, when you're thinking about the CDC guidelines and they're stating you don't want to sit within 6 feet of others, additional studies show that the value of not sitting the person in the middle seat wasn't actually there. And from a personal standpoint, you have to think about it that it was more of a personal comfort level versus what would actually be useful for the pandemic. When I say that, because if you think about if they fill the aisle and the window seat, when you're in the aisle seat, you're still next to the person who's in the aisle seat across from you. And that is way within the 6 feet. So it's kind of like, I think at first, many industries, you're conforming to people's comfort level is what you want to do. You're conforming to what people will feel comfortable with doing business with you. And so when you say that, when we transition into will business travel come back and will business travel pick up, I think the reward has to outweigh the risk and the background that comes for these companies. Because a company now, if they're influencing travel, they're now putting possibly their personal workers at risk, or what is their comfort level? You may risk losing this person and things of that nature. So you're taking on that risk. You're also taking on the risk of bringing people into your business. And is it a faux pas for companies to go back to having their employees travel yet? So I think it's going to be driven. The business travel world, I feel, is more driven by what is going to be foreseen as okay and what is not going to be frowned upon in the industry. And so when that comfort level with the pandemic and with the vaccine coming out, it seems as though maybe people will be more comfortable with putting others out there. But what you can see that is picking up in the travel industry is the personal travel and the vacation travel. Those items are picking up because from a personal level, you're having to now make those decisions for yourself. What do you feel comfortable with moving on? And we see that people are tired of sitting at home. So it's like, it depends on what a personal perspective. Do you need to travel because you have to get from point A to point B, or are you just tired of sitting in your home and that's causing more discomfort for you for feeling that you're stuck? And so with the changes that the airline industry has made, it has made people more comfortable with traveling from point A to point B. And I can say from a personal level, I have traveled on planes post the pandemic has started, and I feel comfortable traveling on planes. I like the changes that they have made, and I don't feel personally that I'm putting myself at risk when traveling on planes. So I do think that when people begin to educate themselves or like increase their own comfort level, this is what's going to drive the industry, the flying industry, to pick up and to increase.
Okay, interesting. And that's an interesting connection you made between just personal travel and business travel, and how one may or may not feed the other, right? Because as you mentioned, there's the sense of corporate responsibility and what a company is asking of their people, and and their clients, and et cetera, and then the decisions individuals are making and their own desire to travel. And so that's interesting, because that now brings me a little to a question I wanted to ask CD, and this connection maybe between personal and business. And so CD, a number of colleagues I've had over the years in different companies that I've worked with in India, there's always been this sense of opportunity for folks who work for global companies out of India. And I hear them speak about the attraction to a global company because of the opportunity for travel, work assignments, potentially even longer term assignments in different countries, whether visas here in the States or other places. And so I'm curious, when you think about this connection of people traveling personally versus for business, what are you hearing in India? Is there, and with the last year of almost no travel and almost no business travel, do you think it's affecting the employee market and what people are looking for in companies? Is it not? Is it changing? I'm curious your perspective there.
That's a great question, and I will expand it a little bit before diving into it. I think it also is tied with how employees have to change how they view their workplace and their employer versus how it used to be. So how it used to be, real quick, employers typically tended to have very large, very lavish campuses. The culture was one of campus-based, attendance-based locations, which were, I would say, fairly good offices. I would say even cushy, good amenities. It was common to have the full works, good food court, good maybe even the gym, many things which were geared towards having employees attracted to being in office. And there was some kind of a talent attraction war, if you will, between companies in terms of how cool is the office and how attractive it is, how meaningful it is. A lot of things which are not directly needed for the work, like workspace and labs, but also things that are indirect. For example, with global companies, the amount of space that's there per head, how spread out the office is, and how well equipped it is, how many meeting rooms are there, how many design spaces are there, collaboration spaces are there, nice places for people to have a scrum meeting and a stand up, and all those kind of things were very big concerns, and they were things that companies had really excelled at, that figured out the right way to set those things up. When the pandemic came, I think initially it was sheer panic, and people were employees were operating, I think, from panic. Companies were operating from panic. How will things go on? And in the context of India, it was very uncommon for people to work remote. For even a small period of time. So, employers were not sure how things would pan out, and whether people can actually switch to working from their homes, in a smooth fashion. I think over the first few months, it worked out, and things settled down. And then people were able to lift their heads up and even kind of go back to a little bit of hiring and other things in a fully remote fashion. There are employees, I would say, who have changed jobs in the last 6 months, who have never seen the premises of their new employer, and they're up and running, and they've been reasonably assimilated and so on. So what I think we saw is that after the first 3 months or so, as things people started making sense of it, I think we see that people are very adaptive. Human beings have a strength of adaptation. And so people, took these things in their stride. The fact that what used to be the norm, the coffee machine, the water cooler, and the chit chat and the informal interaction, all of them went away, and still people figured out how to keep going. In that context, with that context, I think, the fact that, people are not able to meet each other, they're not able to do normal things. I think the fact that they cannot travel to office, most of the offices actually prohibited people from coming just to be on the safe side, as you said, corporate governance and keeping the company safe, and not taking unnecessary risks. So in that context, I think I do not think people have excessively reacted to the fact that, let's say the opportunities of traveling internationally, going to headquarters, going to other countries, meeting the end customers, and the overall rich experience. They have adjusted to it not being there, and I do not think that's a factor for now. However, in the longer term, is business travel dead? I think the business is in every sphere. I can talk mostly about high tech and products and that kind of environment. In this environment, I think the constant discussion. This has of course been a very common discussion. The constant discussion is that I think most of the leaders feel that we are able to survive and do well is because we are kind of working off of the culture and the practices and a lot of things that were built up in the past, and we are kind of living off of. As we look many years into the future, for this kind of work in high tech, it's very hard to do that without the collaboration, the whiteboarding, the kind of intense discussions and the deep dives that inevitably need to happen. And so those things, I think, will necessitate business travel to come back for those reasons. And I think at that time it will again, pick up. I think the future is not going to be a resumption of the past. The modalities will change, the way it goes about will change. But I think it'll definitely come back, and the expectations will be there. And I think the richness of this will be even more valued. If anything, I think people have learned not to take anything for granted in these last many months, and so I think, if anything, these things will be valued even more. The opportunity of traveling, the opportunity of collaborating, the opportunity of being in an office. I think all of these things will be valued even more. More so because there are going to be some corporate forces and some attempts at kind of to see whether we can do without this. And so there's going to be some tension there as well. But I think it's going to bounce back, and there's going to be the expectation that I'm not a free I'm not an individual agent working in my four walls without meeting people. I think the expectation will be absolutely to socialize and meet. The way we go about it might adjust and change. That's my perspective.
So interesting. So, and I want to come back to the socialize and meet question in just our topic in just a second. But before that, so I'm curious, Marianne, based on what CD was saying, I'm curious what you've been seeing. And so if I think about, I don't know, a year ago, I suspect in your recruiting efforts, in your whether you were doing recruiting for for companies, as an outplace recruiter, or whether you were looking to get your own consultant staff, people would ask about facilities and what companies had to offer if they were going to work on site, or they might have talked about what are the travel policies or travel benefits associated with those things. Are they still asking about those? Have they stopped because it seems irrelevant, or are they because they think they're planning for the future? What have you been seeing?
So it's very interesting, and there's a perspective of the employer versus the workforce. And obviously that's always been the case. For the employer, it's been interesting because we've been able to, and they've been able to recruit from outside of their area where it used to be, a commutable distance. And so so they've gotten the advantage of a larger talent pool. But then on the other side, I think that, cost cutting real estate hasn't really been a line item in the past. And with COVID now, I think that it is on the table. And with, the guidelines of getting people back to work, they're really looking at who should go back. I mean, to CD's point, the collaboration piece of it that they lose. But from the workforce perspective, what we're seeing is that these folks can move to where they want. They can be near their family. They can be in areas that are, more reasonable as far as cost of living. But with both sides, there's, obviously cons. And I think one of the big things is like mental health issues and unhealthy lifestyle issues that are unintended consequences. So I think I'm getting off maybe on a left turn on your question, but from a perspective, getting back to the business travel of it, I think that most companies now are seeing that. I think that many of my customers, it's getting down to like the dollar value of putting a person at risk who perhaps may not want to travel. So there's that piece of it. And they're seeing that, for Alan to travel to California, how much time are you out of pocket? How much time are you, spending in? And so if the bottom line is for 4 days, you get 2 days of work in, and then, so that's a factor too. I mean, I don't, from the customers that I'm talking to, and we work with Fortune 100, Fortune 500 customers, and obviously others, but they keep moving the ball. It was going to be July, it was going to be January, I mean, now April, summer, and they're evaluating who should come back, when they should come back, and if they should come back. For a lot of the hiring that's gone on since March, none of those folks have ever had an office. So they were hired to work at home. They got shipped a computer. So even on projects that I'm working on, like a return to work, you're kind of taking a look at what your physical space is, who was where, who's still there. But if you've added 20% to your staff, that 20% has never had a home in an office. So it gets very complicated as to just, does that answer your question?
It does. It helps. And you mentioned a couple things which are interesting, because this is, I think, brings me back to the comment around socializing collaboration. And here's where I'd really like to bring Kineta into this. So Kineta, I heard you speak a couple weeks ago, and I'd say I was somewhere between incredibly just impressed and in awe and shocked at the same time. And the shock was the things that I have chosen to not think about. That's part of my life. I guess I can be like everybody else, live my life in denial. Everything's great and happy. I'll never need to meet someone in your profession. But that's not realistic, right?
That's correct.
But you spoke about a couple. You spoke about a couple really interesting things, and to me, these were things that I guess I was aware of. I had read, I had seen, I paid attention to news, but I hadn't really internalized at all. You spoke about the shift from helping families and loved ones kind of say goodbye to the family members in what used to be a very personal, hands-on, I'll use my term, kind of related to a hug. I don't know those are your words, but kind of what I would describe it as, to what has become Zoom-based and distant and kind of beyond, a little bit arm's length. And so to me, that is very, very related and connected to what CD was talking about around our abilities to collaborate and as people, our ability to be social creatures, and what Marianne was talking about. And I guess I'm curious in two parts of this. Part one is, do you believe that in your industry, you have in fact found a new way to be successful virtually? Or, well, no, you found a way to exist today, but it's not an acceptable way. We need to go back to being more socially connected, right? So that's kind of part one. And then part two, do you believe there's a parallel in what you're experiencing in your industry to what corporate America is going to experience, just on the topic of collaboration, going back to office, and et cetera, right? Because it's all around this personal interaction. And do we need it or don't we? So
Yes.
if you want to take a stab at that?
So the answer is yes, we need it. We need it now more than ever. So with that being said, we did have to adapt. We had to identify what would work that would allow us to stay within the CDC guidelines and still allow us to help the families during this most difficult time. The reality is we could not sit face to face initially. As CD said, it was a panic mode, right? Everyone was, well, what do we do? First of all, we've got to deal with the decedent care. Then how will families feel knowing that we are dealing with decedents with COVID and still sit with us to make arrangements? Because now we can't all quarantine. We still are essential workers. We have to do the work that is required. So with that being said, Zoom was the alternative safe space for us to be face to face, still interact without putting everyone at risk. Then we realized there may be a way to do this where we are in a space safely distanced, wearing masks, obviously, having sanitizer available for those who are comfortable and have been pre-screened. We go through questionnaires like, have you been exposed to COVID? Is anyone in your family been around anyone with COVID? Once that has been eliminated, believe it or not, we try to treat that family as if there is no COVID presence within the guidelines. So they will come to the location. It would allow us to be face-to-face masked and allow us also to create a space for them that's safe where they can gather by minimizing the number of people that are allowed in the space. We have been successful in doing that. We have also adapted by identifying that we had pews set up in our chapels. And the pews, there's no way to really social distance. So believe it or not, our biggest project in the last couple of weeks, we removed all of our pews. We went from a traditional setting to actual Shivari chairs, seating arrangements that could be distanced according to the family's needs. We have also adjusted how we allow the families to view services. So where we used to be, everyone would get on a plane or drive down, or we would set the date so family members could be together. Now we go live. Obviously, we use Facebook Live. So family members from abroad, I mean, we've had services with over 2,000 views at one given time. And those are family members who may not have been able to make it to the actual service in the past. So that's a positive, because we used to gather and there were no cameras. It used to be almost taboo to have video footage of a funeral where you could see a decedent or those weeping or those mourning. And those have turned into now celebrations because the families are so different in their perspective that we've had a loss, but we're celebrating their lives lived through pictures, through memories, through personalization, what they loved. So many items have been added because the physical decedent may not even be there. See, when you think about it with COVID, some family members don't even see their loved one. So now we really have to be creative because we're gathering items and we're putting out fishing rods and we're gathering pieces that remind you of that person. So they're calling it a life story where you can see their lives lived just by looking at images or items on a table. So it makes you really think. And it's funny you said, Alan, that you had never thought about it, right? That is why it's so important that we have these deep conversations in a personable space like we are today, because we need more people to think about not just the object of passing away, which is inevitable, but the object of having something to be remembered by, so that people have a story to tell when we do leave, and then helping our family members who have experienced a loss express that life story, because death is a short period of what occurs, but life is the span that we live. So we have been able to bring families together, to focus on the span of life, to not limit people only to everyone to COVID guidelines. Once that has been expressed, or we notice that that is not a risk, we try our best to make it as personable as possible. And when there is COVID present, to still do the same within the necessary guidelines. We are in this place now. The question is, will we stay there? And I have to say, most likely. I'm just like Mary Ann said, we were told, and then it extended, and then you gave it a different guideline and it was extended. So instead of keeping pews, we took them out, because we don't know how long this is going to be. So that is a change for us. It was a drastic change, because traditionally that's what you see, but we moved that so that we could adapt, right? Identify, adapt, and then move on. That has been our strategy. Also, I do see that Facebook Live and different streaming options will remain, because I do believe that now that we've entered into this space, it's going to be hard to remove that, because they have become accustomed to it, and it's very functional, it's efficient, and it allows everyone to be in the space, even if they're abroad. So I do not see us really ever removing that benefit. I believe it's going to increase, and it will develop and improve over time. I also believe that as we move forward, we will be more aware of the necessity of being prepared. This pandemic has forced us to understand that death is something we have to be prepared for, and that we are susceptible in dealing with. We have had children as young as 5. We recently had an 18-year-old, a 33-year-old, and of course the elderly, that have all been impacted by this. So I have just been expressing to family members and friends, there is no early age in preparing and knowing the aptitude of what we need in order to deal with funeral arrangements and services, because we never know when that can occur. So I believe this has really catapulted people into understanding that fact, and then getting the necessary information and doing research so that they are prepared in this area.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
There's so much in there.
I'm sorry.
And so no, that's great. And it makes me think. So a comment you made where my thought went, just to engage the others, is you described the effectiveness, right, of the use of technology, let's just call it, right, that to accomplish your objective. And I'm curious, Marion, from your perspective and what you're seeing in recruiting. So I suspect most, if not all, interviewing is all virtual now. What do you think? Do you think about the probability of somebody who interviews virtually and via camera and phone, and they get hired, and at some point they go back to the office, and as it turns out, nobody likes them at all, or they don't like the company, right? What the personal side of people is just not what you got on video. And the reason I'm thinking about that is Kineta, I'm thinking about, for your example, in a future time, people reflecting back on the experience and saying, because they had maybe this life journey, this life story, digital experience, maybe they have a more positive memory of the experience. Where, Marion, I'm thinking very possibly in the creative space, it might be the opposite. And so I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
So it's interesting because we've had to, I feel like, I mean, my company is 28 years old, and I mean, we started the company when I was a baby. But 29 years ago, all of the recruiting, I was bringing people into my office to interview them. So everything was FaceTime. But with the advent of us, you know, kind of expanding into other areas, I didn't have brick and mortar everywhere. So we have changed to, you know, we in interviewing, first is a phone interview with HR, and then there's a technical evaluation, and then there's a last look. So we have already morphed to that, and we are used to hiring people, not physically seeing them. So I think that we're really good at that. I think it's going to be a learning curve for companies because they're not used to that. So even though I went through all of that, you know, virtually, I would still physically bring the candidate in to meet the customer. So I think that is going to be a difference. And I think that, you know, part of it is going to be a difference in the way that employers manage. Because in my experience, many managers, it was, you know, FaceTime. They want to see you. They want to see you in your office at 7 a.m. They want to see you working late. So it's less managing by productivity and end product. So I think that has to be, you know, looked at and as a big change. You know, as far as recruiting and consulting services, I think that those things will remain static. You know, the reasons that you're looking at using consultants instead of hiring employees, I mean, there's maybe changes in technology. There's managing peaks and valleys where it's easier. And then there's also the economics of it, where companies, the way that they book long-term expenses for employees versus services. So I think that those things will remain, but I think that employers are now getting more used to doing what we've done, and so we're working with customers through that because that's what we've been doing for years now. Does that answer your question?
Okay. It does. It's interesting. Okay, so you were already on this road just from a evolutionary perspective.
Yeah.
And how you know, meet with people, et cetera. So Araceli, I'm curious, and so I'm going to try to ask this question to not in any way put you in an uncomfortable position with your employer. That's not what I'm intending to do, right? But you work in an industry that is fundamentally based on moving people and products, right? And so, you know, in a very simplified manner. And what we've been talking about to a large degree today is people talking about very possibly a continuation of not moving people too much from a business perspective. And even Kineta from a non-business perspective, right? Just a change in philosophy of how people move around and rely on air travel. Now, I guess I can be cynical, right? I can be very cynical. I could say, well, you know, it's not to the airline industry's benefit to promote collaboration technology and to promote a world where we don't have to travel anywhere because that's not their business. But, you know, whatever. That's just a cynical perspective. But I'm curious, things clearly are changing. And what do you see happening in your industry where do you see a potential shift to try to drive more towards, you know, clients who are, you know, non-business, vacation, pleasure travel versus business, trying to find ways of changing the nature of business travel, trying to shift more to cargo? Do you see any of these things happening in the industry that would kind of parallel what you're hearing from the panel, or no? You think they seem to be operating separately?
So a few pieces to that. So I think while business travel is down, if we go back to the beginning when he discussed parcel and mail delivery and shipments and things of that nature, that has increased significantly. The e-commerce world has increased significantly. So if we look at it from just a global aviation in general, the cargo, and I can say personally, I've seen cargo has picked up significantly for the airline industry, right? Because most people are doing things e-commerce now, and things are having to move. You're also having to move supplies and things of that nature a lot more now. So when you think about cargo, that has increased. Would it be it won't be beneficial if business travel does not go back to where it is? Absolutely. For the airline industry, you would want business travel to go back to where it was. And so I do feel that the airline industry is doing everything they can to ensure that people are comfortable with that. I don't believe that it would be realistic to say that business travel is not going to come back. It's kind of like with what CD said, that human interaction is needed. And a lot of times companies benefit on having the right people in the right places. But that doesn't also, that not having business travel will also, if you think about the broader picture, will increase the expense of hiring people for companies as well. So if you think of it, say in the food industry, you have one food safety manager that would be, stationary in one location in corporate. This person would have to travel around. In many companies as well, you have an auditor, right? And you have hundreds of locations. This auditor would have to travel around and audit all these hundreds of locations. Well, if business travel doesn't pick up, do these companies now have to hire all these hundreds of people in every single location to get these tasks done? And so you would have to think about which one is going to be more cost effective and beneficial for the companies as well. So I do think for companies at a large, it's going to be more beneficial for them to go back to business travel after a while. It's just kind of like what Marianne said with hiring consultants versus hiring employees. You hire consultants because they're able to move around and they're able to assess more things for you as well. But now are you having to increase that amount of people that you're hiring? So I think it's kind of like what Marianne said, it's a give and take with the business and where they're going to cut costs. So right now companies are cutting costs on facility and business structures because people are working from home. But at the end of the day, can everyone continue to work from home is what they're going to have to look for. So for a long story short, I do believe that business travel will have to pick up for companies eventually. I don't know if it's in the near 3 to 6 months future, but in the long-term effect, I do feel that business travel will continue to pick up. And I just had one comment on the interviews and the virtual interviews because I experienced it myself with our company. And what I've seen, however, with virtual interviews, it works very well for management level positions and admin positions. I don't feel that it's the best mechanism for your frontline employees, like your people who are doing like the dishwashing or the forklift operators and things of that nature. I don't see that they really excel in getting their personality and what they can bring effectively. So I think that part of interviewing, I don't know if many companies have gone to interview on frontline via video interviewing, but I see that going back to face because it doesn't seem that the individuals interviewing for those positions really have the skill set and the confidence to do it via a camera.
Interesting.
That makes sense.
And one of the things, that I wonder about it, just general perspective when we have these different panels and we talk about these things is just the perspectives of the industries we work in and the people we work with. And for me, right, I would have zero perspective in even being able to understand what are the current challenges of hiring, factory workers and of life, because I don't currently work in a factory. And so I think we do think about a lot of what's happening today, and we all think about it in the context of where we have experience. And it's interesting just how broad the world really is, and the whole economy. and it makes you really question how many of these solutions are in fact universal, or maybe they're not, and maybe they work in small segments, but they don't work for all and everywhere. So that's a pretty key call out. So I'm curious, based on where we are now in about 10 minutes. So what are you guys thinking? What questions do you have for each other? Where it's been thought provoking. Not too many. I still have a list. I can dig in.
I guess I'll bring up a question for others here. So some of the things I've heard around me in some of the companies. So I was talking to a person who is in a Big Four consultancy company, working as an auditor. And what he said was, most of the time, they spend, visiting clients, working on specific clients, and, having the central office, the headquarters, if you will, makes no sense because, they're always on the road or focused on people who are external. And yet they have this, HQ. But because of COVID, they've realized that they're better off being dispersed, and they're probably, post-pandemic, probably not getting back into that big, HQ kind of model. Similarly, I think I've heard elsewhere as well. The corporate, location, has discovered that they need not be together because they're really not collaborating. Whereas, there's the creative arms and the, maybe the field-oriented, which really need to be there because, they have interdependencies that make it inefficient to be, working remotely. So I'm curious, have you heard these things? Has it started, this re-examination of which parts of the organization should be co-located, which parts can be dispersed? Has it started bleeding into kind of hiring practices, or even kind of in a broader way? What are you hearing?
I can take part of that. So it's interesting. One of my large customers, who is headquartered in New Jersey, they are going, it's a huge company with arms in many states and a company that we've all heard of. And they're going through like a new expense management process to bring everything together. Because in many of my customers, a lot of that is so manual. So, with all the technology we have, there are still administrators who have to go into the office because they're getting paper checks or paper invoices, or and depending on, with finance, depending on who you ask. Like, I often get asked, and this is surprising to me, I often get asked as far as like an audit question, how many people I have, how long have they been there, what locations, who are they reporting to? So I'm reporting to my customer where all of my people are, and they don't have that. So I think that, it depends on the company. And I think that maybe newer, more nimble companies have all of that process automated, but these huge mammoth companies just don't have all of it automated. So customers or companies are having like a lot of admin folks literally having to be there because it's shuffling paper from, which is kind of crazy in these days.
Interesting. And so, interesting that you bring that up, Marion, because I guess what I'm curious about is when you think about where companies are today and what has happened over the last number of months, what's just been your broad experience from a business continuity perspective? Do you believe, did you see where companies had strong continuity plans that they just kind of shifted into the continuity plan? Or no, this was totally different. It wasn't just business continuity, business disruption, power disruption, anything like that. It was so different that it didn't make a difference. Or no, those companies who had very strong plans and practiced their plans, they were able to shift. They didn't have this, what you were explaining, Marianne, where they still had these big reliances on administrative functioning or things like that? What do you guys
So
think?
I think that most of my customers have pretty seamlessly moved everyone to home. And I think that it perhaps isn't a long-term view yet. Maybe now it is. It took a while to kind of do planning where people had, in March, what their marching orders were and what their budgets were and what they wanted to accomplish. And all of that came to a screeching halt for a while. But even the companies who have literally seamlessly brought their workforce home, almost all of them still have their admins going in. No matter how the technology of running the company and the processes, those kinds of things. But I think almost all of them can now have a visual to what needs to happen, where maybe that wasn't a focus for technology before because the return on the investment maybe wasn't as visible.
Yeah. Interesting. Now, Kineta, you're in an industry that I'm going to say over the last decade or so, but it could be longer, has been undergoing a lot of consolidation, right? And kind of move from mom and pop regional to national, if not international conglomerates. Do you see that as we benefited during this period from the scale technology infrastructure? We didn't.
That is a for sure yes. I come from mom and pop, right? So I have both perspectives. As a fourth generation funeral director, I've been in the business for over 20 years. And I can say with the firm, yes, it has benefited. Because of the corporate collaboration, we were able to quickly shift to a change. As I would say in my family-oriented locations, they contact me. Some of my colleagues that work in family, they contact me and say, okay, what are you guys doing in this era? Because I need to make this change and I'm trying to see how do I implement it. So I will say firmly that yes, that collaboration corporately has enhanced how we serve families. It has given us that front runner edge to be able to supply them with Making Everlasting Memories, which is one of our products, where we have families drop images through a link and automatically go into a video tribute. That's something that we could not do independently. So having memories through pictures tell a story, right? So at the end of the day, you want to be able to tell that story most efficiently. It has made it more efficient to click a link and upload images, download music, and have everything created without a family ever having to enter the space of our location has really blown me away in how we've been able to train and adapt to this. And Marianne is right. Our frontline workers, our administrative team, they're in-house. But yes, through our corporate office, we have a lot of people working from home. When I contact their office, it rings to their cell phone and they're in front of their computer in their room, but they're still efficiently taking care of everything that we need from a corporate perspective. So in our world, we call it our field associates and our corporate associates. And then we have created something sociably, like online, we call them snapshots, where we upload photos of people in the field working and photos of people working from home and what it's like for them. And it's socially still keeping us connected, even though we're somewhat divided. We've been able to change the way of how we interact. Some people we would never see from the corporate perspective, I'm seeing now. I'm putting faces with names because we've adapted to how we socialize in this pandemic and creating spaces where we can still see each other, even though we're not face to face. So yes, it has definitely improved how we serve our families. And I'm very grateful that they have been working behind the scenes to bring all of this new adaptation to our locations.
Interesting. And a very interesting comment that you made about seeing people, digitally, but seeing people that you otherwise would not have seen.
That's correct.
And so an interesting concept, because I know there's some degree that I think, well, I know CD has not seen in person
Uh-huh.
people for a year now that we've worked with, but he's seen them digitally, right?
Digitally,
And
yes.
Marion spoke about how she's been doing that. So here's the question to each of you guys: What do you think when you so for the last so many months, right? We've been social distance, different forms of isolation for different people, depending where you are and where you live and what's been going on. Um, are we more connected now or less connected?
Good question. It's forced us, I believe, to be more because it made us realize how disconnected we were, even though we were face to face. I see more people making an effort to see their families. For instance, families who are out of town, they share with me that these different apps where you can look face to face have been utilized more now than ever because it's forced us to see each other differently.
I think that, I mean, I absolutely agree that personally, it's more face to face with families where, I mean, I have family in different states, and now we celebrate holidays on Zoom or,
Yeah.
you know, where we'd never done that before, even,
That's right.
you know, when we didn't spend the holidays together. But what I'm hearing from, you know, from customers is that people are more isolated because you don't get to walk down the hall and talk to a few people where, you know, and even though there's a lot of Zoom meetings and those kinds of things, they're very pointed. And so you don't get a lot of the big picture where, you know, CD was talking about like the collaboration. So it's a lot of a big picture thing that, you know, people I think feel very isolated in their positions.
Good point.
So I think personally we're more connected, but on the business side, and you know, unfortunately, I think that employers have to, moving forward, really look at mental health issues. I've had 4 people that I know in business, in customers, that have committed suicide.
Mm.
And because they're so disconnected. And I don't think any of them would have happened if
Had
not
they been
isolation.
involved.
Mhm.
Very good point.
The connection and disconnection kind of varies on the level in the industry. I think in my industry, because I have meetings with corporate senior leaders and things of that nature on my level. However, I do manage teams that have frontline teams who work actually on the production floors and things of that nature. So I think for the frontline production floor, like that group of team, I feel is more disconnected. And I say that because prior to the pandemic, I would walk my production floors, I would walk my production lines, I would stay on the lines with them for maybe 5 to 10 minutes. I would go into the briefings, we would be all around each other, high-fiving. There was a lot of physical action, a lot of them seeing me on the floor, a lot of people interaction with the frontline team in the frontline floor positions. Well, that's not there anymore, and they feel it. They'll ask you, "Hey, Araceli, where are you at? Where have you been?" These and that nature. Well, you can't necessarily be on those lines with them anymore. You can't work a station next to them. We've spread out all the stations to go 6 feet apart so that people are not working near each other. So from that aspect, from the frontline workers, there's a disconnect with people because you can't do that in the break rooms and in the lunch rooms. We spread the tables apart. We're putting dividers. We want you to have your mask on and things of that nature. There's a huge disconnect of people interaction that we haven't really been able to grasp and get back. The only interaction I think that's more connected and you see more of would be on a corporate level. And that's because now the conference calls are now Teams meetings. So when people see their cameras, you're seeing these individuals that previously you would only speak to them via email or conference calls, and you never really had that face-to-face. And now you're having town halls where the CEOs and the executive leaders are being able to be displayed for you to see and hear. And that previously did not happen prior to the pandemic. However, the teams that are actually out there on the field for us getting it done every day, I do feel there is a disconnect in and an isolation from what the norm that they're used to. The being able to be their cheerleader and being able to speak to them and things of that nature, that has changed so much. Them just coming into your office, sitting at your desk, having a conversation with you, you no longer feel comfortable doing those things in the production world, in the manufacturing world. And so I think it really differs from which level of business that you're actually working in.
Interesting.
Great thoughts.
CD?
Sure, sure, Ellen. So I think, to the question, has communication improved or worsened? I think it has become different. Just like Araceli just said, and others also have said, people have, used and technology and seen each other maybe for the first time in their lives. They may have worked for decades. If I take an example, Alan leads a global organization, and in this pandemic phase, he has had icebreakers and those things where the entire global organization saw each other, and kind of in a very casual way. They may have never done that. It's not everybody in companies that get to travel across the company. So those are good things I think should continue in the future. On the other hand, I think there's a ton of things which have felt like loss, especially in terms of intimacy. With all the technological advances we have, whatever has come forward right now is just that the buttons on the video conferencing apps have become more rounder and easier to click. Technology is yet to solve intimacy, how to really feel that you're there, and you're feeling the handshake, and it's a warm gesture, and you're feeling the vibes. That doesn't happen in technology yet. There's quite some room to cover. So I think my takeaway from all of this is we have to be very thoughtful. The practices that worked well, I think we should continue into the future, and the things that did not work, then we have to continue to look for what will work better. I do not think we should bounce back to the past, but we should not just embrace what is there, because I think there are a lot of suboptimal things that are also there. And without intimacy, I do not think organization can function. Trust, after all, is the basis, I think, of all human endeavors. And trust and technology hasn't found that marriage yet.
Very good. I want to say something about that, CD. And thank you, Marianne, for bringing something to light that I actually work with outside of my day-to-day in the funeral industry. My focal point is suicide awareness and the power of understanding. The rates of suicide have increased dramatically, as she stated, and that is a very true fact. That we must understand as leaders, how can I create a way to keep people connected in the disconnect that has been developed from the pandemic? That's a good way for leaders to think about trying to make a way for us to socialize and not forget about those who are not face-to-face. Because she's so right, as I said in a previous call, human touch. When you remove that piece or that aspect, it really jolts us when we can't hug or touch or embrace. And as CD just said, we have not been able to marry the two with technology and intimacy. That was such a powerful statement. And so as leaders, I believe that's something we can really take, digest, and figure out a way to bring people together, even though they are apart. That would be something to really focus on for 2021.
Yeah, I think that as leaders, that perhaps we're so focused on, especially with technology, you're focused on going from meeting to meeting, and it's more task oriented, and taking the time to understand how a person is feeling. And not only understand, but getting them to be comfortable,
right,
to be able to have that conversation. I think that's something that we all need to work on.
That's right. We had a situation last week with our team. It was a business transaction, a business need, and the decision could have been made based on a business answer. However, I told him, what does your human side say? right? Let's not lose humanity, who we are as humans, right? So the business piece can sometimes remove the humanity piece. So I
Yeah.
guess going into 2021, how can we merge the two to stay humanly connected, even in a technology advanced world?
You can see in emails, it's easy to take things out of context. And through technology, if we're communicating that way, we're not really listening.
That's right.
Right. Very true. So all great stuff. Interesting. Every one of you said something a little different, but it all said something very common, which was the concept of and, right? That we can be connected and isolated at the same time, right? And all these different things that are happening at the same time. Also, this the awareness of understanding people's needs, and as a leader, needing to really connect with what's going on and what people need. There's I'm going to do this author such an injustice. I can't remember where, when, what, but one of these I read somewhere, right? The references to, as a leader, you have to understand what your people want, not what you want, right? You want to celebrate. It might be nice that that's how you like to celebrate, but it might not be how they like to celebrate. And so you're bringing up that our people all come from different places, have different roles, different experiences. So it's not necessarily what's comfortable for us, right? But it's really understanding what do they need. And I think that becomes so much more important in the world today, where we're so much more intertwined with the lives of our staff, or we need to be, and need to be understand what's going on and what their needs are. So that was an excellent call out. So, Si, anything you want to throw out? Any question you want to add to the mix?
It's been a very rich conversation, quite a. I love. I'll add sort of one thing, and it'll be a form of a summary that I'm observing, if you will, very, very directly. You know, we mentioned the pillars around technology, business, humanity, and society, and you've gone full circle to encompass all those and bring them together, which is extremely powerful. The thought that occurs to me as I look and respect the conversation here, in so many ways, intimacy, awareness, we are rediscovering ourselves, we're rediscovering each other, we're rediscovering reality. And I think the vantage points are tremendous that you've offered. So just a summary, broad comment, but no particular questions to add to it, Alan and company.
I really appreciate
Thank you, Si. So look, this is.
Go ahead again, Alan.
I was just going to say, this has been a great. So, Marianne, did you?
I said I just really appreciated listening to the different perspectives that that the panel has had, and you know, being able to listen to maybe the other side, where you're living your day-to-day life and you don't really consider those things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this has been a treat for me. So thank you so much. I've really enjoyed hearing the different perspectives and each one of you, as I anticipated, right, have such a breadth of experience and knowledge in your industries, and you brought that forward. So in closing, you want to go around the horn, and you guys can all have your last word, whatever it might be, to close out the session. Should we go in reverse alphabetical order this time? So,
okay. I'll go first.
Start with you, Marianne.
So I think, you know, one of the things that you touched on in listening to people, one of the things in coaching people through interviews, I tell them to make sure that you're listening to the question and answering the question, because many times we talk about what we want to talk about instead of what someone wants to hear. And so I think that that can be a key to listening to, you know, our peers, our, you know, our teams, and not be, and listening to the question and answering and responding to what they need, not what we want to tell them.
Excellent.
Very good.
Excellent. Okay.
I would use one of those old sayings that say, stay green, if you're familiar. When we ripen on the vine, we were plucked off. So the good news is when we stay green, we're ever learning, we're ever adapting, and we're ever
I've never heard
seeking
that.
way. That's a good takeaway then. Stay green. Stay ever learning. The reason I tell my team that is because when you ripened on the vine, you're usually plucked off. So stay green. That would be my closing statement. And change is inevitable. So just adapt, go with the flow, initiate the changes that are necessary and then move on, execute on them. And most of all, stay connected to those around you and those that we love and support. And the best way we can do that is face-to-face interaction is the best form. However, we have alternatives available to us now. So let's use them and find ways to let our human side reach those in need. That's it.
Excellent. CD?
I've really enjoyed the diversity today. I must say that, this was probably very thought-provoking to me to kind of hear the perspectives from the death industry. And, very honestly, it got me thinking. I've read somewhere about, how the samurais embrace the concept of death, and they're prepared, always. And I wonder that, in the corporate context, as we advance, the corporate, ways and mission and everything, some of the things we talked today, the human side, the empathy and all of that, from a finality of death kind of thought process, I wonder that, what do we need to do to be better ancestors? The practices that we do incorporate, is it really making it better for humankind, or can we do things differently that essentially that our descendants will say that we had good ancestors? So I am provoked by that kind of thought. Thank you.
Good.
Okay.
Right.
I think I would I enjoyed the panel with everyone and everyone's perspective. I think what I would leave with and what we all in companies have to focus on moving forward is, I know in the past, everyone is lead with your people, but more than ever, this is a time when we need to lead with our people and understanding our people and understanding it's not just cut and dry with anything anymore. It's not cut and dry if a person doesn't make it to work, a person's late for work, a person has challenges. It's always, you need to ask the question why and ensure that they are okay. It's not, beating down on a person and things of that nature. We're not in that environment anymore. We really have to stay focused on ensuring that people are okay. People is what runs your business, but more so right now is what we should be focused on caring about. Because it's more emotional. Businesses and operations right now is more emotional than ever. So I just want to stay and ensure that everyone stays people oriented at the moment and staying agile to change, because we're going to continue to change. In January, there's going to be something else we all have to shift and change towards. So that is what I think that we should all stay focused on in the future.
Continual reinvention.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. Thank you for your time. This is wonderful, wonderful thoughts. And I really appreciate you all coming together to do this. Thank you, Todd, back somewhere behind the curtain, making this happen, and Si for setting this up. And so with that, guess we're a wrap.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to all.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to all. But before a wrap, Alan, how about you, my good friend? How about last words of wisdom from you before we sign off? Alan.
I don't know that I have anything to add. This has been fantastic. I'll just kind of echo some of what I heard, which is let's make sure we listen, and let's make sure we continue our focus on our people, because you're not a leader if there's no one following. So our people are key to our success. So absolutely.
Well said. Thank you all so much, and thank you so much, Alan, likewise, for orchestrating the conversation all around. Well, please take care all, and we'll look forward to seeing you in 2021.
Sounds great. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.